Hi, I'm Joe Saunders with Miniature Landscape Hobbies, and in this episode, we're going to sit in on one of my painting lessons. We're going to cover how to prepare models, how to prime models, and how to do basic paint layering. Let's get down to it. Miniature Landscape Hobbies is proudly supported by these sponsors. From the beginner's point of view, the art of painting miniatures, whether they are for wargaming, displays, or dioramas, can appear pretty daunting. Despite this, there doesn't seem to be a lot of YouTube content out there to help beginners get a start in the hobby. You know, really focus on the basics. To achieve this then, I thought it would be good to delve into an example of a painting lesson I gave recently. This was with a young man named Chase. Chase is into Warhammer 40,000, but he doesn't have much painting experience. So I thought I would help him by introducing him to the absolute essential but very basic beginner skills of preparing the model, priming and layer painting, midtones, and highlights. All of the work is done by Chase himself, so you can see the progress of a brand new hobbyist. I hope you'll find this process informative. Please support us by subscribing on Patreon. Our subscribers receive a 5% discount on paint and building supplies from Torchlight Games, promotional products from Event Horizon Hobbies, free access to 3D print files, and a whole lot more. If you wish to make a one-time donation, click the button for Super Thanks. Joe from Miniature Landscape Hobbies here with my buddy Chase. This is hopefully the first episode in a series about some skills for the absolute beginner painter. Chase, he has some experience with Warhammer 40,000, isn't that right? Approximately how long have you been painting?
Oh, about maybe 3 weeks now.
3 weeks, okay. Well, I've been painting for about 30 years, so a little bit more experience, but we're gonna show you some tips and tricks. It's gonna make you an awesome painter. And when you get your models on the board, your opponents will be wowed. All right, so let's take a quick look. So what did you bring today to paint?
I brought 2 Space Marine Scouts.
2 Scouts. We'll hold them up here in front of the camera. Okay. So we're going to do Space Marines. Now, I have not done Space Marines for probably 15 years. That shouldn't be an issue. We're going to knock them out. And what chapter are we going to do?
Ultramarines.
Ultramarines, so lots of blue. So fortunately, I've got lots of blue paint with me today. Okay, so we're going to get down to basics, and we'll be right back. So show us what you've got here.
We have one Ultramarine Sergeant, Scout Sergeant, and 1 Ultramarine Scout.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to paint these up. So the first step with most model painting, after you get the model assembled, is you would often clean them. So in the old days when I was your age, we had something called release agent on our plastic models, and some companies still use a pretty greasy release agent. And so if you take the model and you felt like a little bit of a slipperiness on the outside, and you would need to take that off with dish soap and water. Fortunately for us, Games Workshop doesn't use that release agent anymore, but if you were to be using a resin model, you would definitely have to do that. In this case, we're not going to deal with that, so we can just go straight to priming. Everybody has a different idea about how to prime, but generally you want to work with either white, gray, or black. Obviously, the lighter the color, the more the colors will stand out on the model. But the darker the color, the easier it is to build shading on your rank and file models. So I think we'll probably start with black, if that's okay with you.
Yep.
Now, in this case, since we're indoor, we're going to use a airbrush primer. But if we were outdoor, we could use any old spray primer. So something that's important is to make sure that your primer doesn't damage your model first. If in doubt, grab a piece of sprue and spray it before you spray your beautiful models. In most cases, something like a Rust-Oleum or any hardware store black, gray, or white spray paint will work. But like I said, right now we're going to use an airbrush, which means we've got to put on some masks.
So here we go, we are going to prime this black.
Okay, so we're back and our models are now primed. So I've got a slightly glossy primer on these, but it'll work just fine. And the reason why we do this, Chase, is so that when we layer our paints over top, so these guys are ultramarines, so we're going to have a lot of blue. When we layer our paints over top, paint sticks to itself a lot better than it sticks to plastic. So this will make the process of layering our paints on a little bit easier. Also, what we've done is we've glued some nails to the bottom. So you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So that makes the models a little easier to handle. We don't have to risk getting our fingers in the paint. And then when the paint is dry, you can just snap them off the top. So from here, I just want to talk a little bit about the style we're going to use when we paint these. So when you painted these guys before, how would you do it?
I'll just start with blue,
Mm-hmm.
and then work my way through each detail.
Okay. The method where you paint a single color where you would expect to see it and then move on to the next until you finish with just one color in each spot is called the flat color painting method. This is a good way to get models done quickly. What we're going to do in this case is a slightly more complex method, which layers acrylic paints to build an impression of shadow in some areas and reflected light in others. Usually it's called the Games Workshop method or acrylic layer painting. It's all basically the same, and even though we call it the Games Workshop method, because that's what they talk about in their books, it long predates Games Workshop. So people have been painting in that style for a very long time. And it relies on starting dark, usually starting dark, and then layering the layers until you get to the very lightest color. And finally, you're working with a highlight. So the first step is to get what's often referred to as the base color down. So that would be the darkest color on the model, the darkest colors on the model that we're going to increasingly add lighter colors to. Okay, so we've talked over our color scheme, and Chase decided that we're going to start with flat blue, which is a good color. Now I've got the Vallejo model color, but you could use any equivalent color. It doesn't matter the manufacturer. Put it on the palette. With model paints, generally a little goes a long way, but something that's important is we're working on the base coat. So that would be the base color. So that would be the foundation for all of the armor. And when we're doing that, what we want to make sure we're doing is adding a very smooth base coat. So sometimes this is when it's appropriate to use more than one coat. And if you're going to place more than one coat over each other, it's best to start with a fairly heavily watered down paint. Now, we've got a bit of a limited time frame here, so we're not going to water it down too much. But generally, the more thin coats, the better when it comes to the base coat. You want to just add a couple dabs of water with your brush in there and stir it up.
So just...
Yep, exactly.
And then...
Yep, go for it. Perfect. All right, so then we check the consistency. It's still maybe not flowing, and there's no perfect rule to your consistency. It's just what you like. But I would think a little more water yet.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so that's probably good. Now, there's no, 30 years on, there's no way to teach paint consistency. It's just one of those things. So different people like different consistencies, but I think this will be a good starting point. All right, so now, Chase, the next step is to pick out our blue areas and just paint them. Okay, so we're getting ready to now put the base colors down for the pants, and we want to do something a little on the brown side, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so there's some khaki, that might work well. So will that be okay to start?
That'll be perfect.
Okay, all right, so same as before, you want to transfer some water to it. Okay, so Chase, you've got most of your base colors blocked in, and it's looking pretty good. And you've decided now that you're going to move on to the skin tones, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So the trick with flesh colors is that humans are, of course, used to looking at people's faces. So that means that you want to create a little more depth in the skin tones than you would in the rest of the colors on the model. It's just a good painting practice. So usually for skin tones, what I do is I start with a dark brown. So in this case, flat brown I find works pretty well. So we'll block in the colors first with flat brown, and then we'll layer up from there. So now you've got most of the colors blocked in, and it's looking pretty good. So now it's time to start talking about midtones. And midtones are the lighter colors that show where the light is reflecting on the model. It's pretty straightforward. We just take our base color again and either mix it up lighter or find a paint that we have that's one tone lighter.
Make sure, so one thing you always want to do in the Games Workshop styles, is their style, is you also want to trace the edges of his shoulder pads, and anything that needs a hard highlight. You add a little water to the mix if you need to fix the flow. I don't know if you do, but you might need to. It looks a little gummy to me. So what you're doing.
Now you've got your midtones on pretty well all your colors. So now you're going to want to go to your first highlight. So we start with dark, then we go a midtone, and then we go to a highlight. And with a highlight, you're only just picking out the very edges of the plates of the armor or anywhere the light is reflecting specifically. So you're not going to use a lot. You go at it very carefully with a small brush.
You also check, go to the edge, yeah, and then the edges of the armor, even a finer line if you can.
Okay, Chase, so now we're moving on. You've highlighted most of the areas on the model, and so we're moving to the skin tone. So you're going to highlight here with, I believe this is Vallejo. This is AK Flat Flesh. So just, okay, that's okay. Just start real light. Always paint that back up. Okay, so you've got your highlight colors on. You've basically done your three colors to work it up. Now, we haven't done the guns or some of the black. We'll do that later. But at this point, we probably want to enhance the shadows on the, say, the cape and on the fabrics and the armor. And so there's a couple different ways we can do that. So see here, let me grab a brush, where the colors stand out with a fairly steep gradient between the two. So we can do something to tone that down. Now, there's two ways to do it. Well, three ways to do it. One, you can just leave it. So if you get your colors layered just nicely, you can always just leave it as is. You can also take your mid-tone, water it down until it's just like a very, very thin tint and spread it over the top. Sometimes that's called paint glazing, or you can use a shader wash. Now, the company Army Painter has some amazing products that will do this work for you. So there's flesh tone. So I think if we apply that, you'll really like the effect. So let's go get them out, and we'll get down to work on it. At this time, Chase had been working for a couple of hours straight, and it was time to wrap up. It's important that you take your time with your work, as your accuracy tends to decrease as you work longer. For this reason, I always recommend that you take at least 3 to 4 sessions to prepare a batch of models. When you rush your work, it shows. Don't worry though, we'll revisit the remaining steps we need to teach Chase in a future video. We still need to look at metallics, lining in, basing, and varnishing. Keep an eye out for those steps in the future. In the meantime, let's take a look at Chase's progress so far. His models have been prepared, primed, and most paint layering is complete. Soon enough, these Space Marines will be done and ready for the games table. Great job, Chase. Keep up the good work. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Please remember to subscribe, press the bell button so you get immediate notification on our videos, and until next time, remember to keep building life in miniature.